Desera lay prone against the rooftop ledge, sniper rifle steady, eyes sharp through the scope. She had spent a lifetime behind the trigger, and in that time, she'd learned one absolute truth. The real threats weren't the ones charging blindly. It was the ones who watched. She scanned the tree line, searching for the flicker of something out of place, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, a glint of movement that betrayed an unseen enemy. Then she saw it. A lone figure, too still, too precise, not a thrall. Desera adjusted her sights, centering on the target. The figure crouched low, raising something to their shoulder, a scoped rifle. "Trooper," she muttered, heartbeat steady. She exhaled. One shot, one kill. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The trooper's head snapped back, body crumpling like a rag doll into the brush. "Target down," she confirmed. Ashley, positioned beside her with the 240B machine gun, had been scanning the opposite flank. She hadn't fired a round yet, until now. Ashley's finger tightened on the trigger as she spotted movement on the right. A group of thralls, fast and aggressive, closing in on the facility's side. "Right side! Engaging!" The 240B roared to life, spitting fire and lead. The first wave of thralls crumpled instantly, their bodies ripped apart by the sheer force of the high-caliber rounds. The survivors twisted unnaturally, adjusting mid-charge, but Ashley didn't stop. She walked her fire through them, cutting down another 4 before the rest scattered for cover. "Damn things don't quit," she muttered, reloading the belt with practiced speed. Then Shade tensed. He wasn't behind a weapon, he didn't need one. His talent was something else. Something colder. He stared ahead, unblinking. Then he saw it. "Front!" His voice was low, sharp, final. Desera adjusted her rifle, shifting her aim forward. The shadows moved, not one, not two, many. She tightened her grip. "This isn't a probe anymore." Ashley growled, slamming the bolt to the rear on her weapon. "Number this is the real thing." Shade's expression didn't change. "They're coming." Inside the war room, Gunner stood over the holographic battlefield display, his single blue eye locked on the drone feeds. The fight outside was brutal but manageable. Until now, the heat signatures shifted. More than that, the battlefield itself was changing. Gunner's jaw tightened as the first rift flickered open on the edge of the battlefield. Then another, and another, small controlled portals. Not random breaches, but deliberate insertions. Strategic, calculated. From each one, hostiles emerged. They weren't thralls. These were something worse. Gunner didn't need confirmation, but Ashley's voice crackled through the radio anyway. "War room, this is Roof. We got incoming. This ain't just more thralls. Rifts are opening, and I got unknowns forming around them." Gunner didn't look away from the display. "I see it." Eli, seated at the controls, was already rerouting the drone feeds. "Gunner, those portals, those are placed." She wasn't wrong. This wasn't just an assault. This was a real attack. The question was, what the hell were they about to walk into? The fight on the rooftop was a war zone all its own. Ashley had the 240B roaring, the heavy machine gun sending waves of lead into the advancing forces. The muzzle flash lit up the roof, the recoil kicking against her shoulder, but she never let up. Rounds spit through the air, tearing through enemy ranks below. Every burst bought them seconds, every second mattered. Desera was surgical with her shots. Her sniper rifle cracked once, one of the approaching troopers dropped. Another shot, another down. She never wasted a bullet. The new wave of hostiles weren't just rushing in like the thralls. These were disciplined. They moved tactically, using cover, dodging fire, returning shots. Then, Shade moved. He dropped to one knee, flipping open the bag he'd carried up to the roof. Grenades, lots of them. Ashley's gun clicked empty for a brief moment. Shade pulled the first pin. "Fire in the hole." He lobbed the grenade dead center into a forming cluster of enemies. Boom! Bodies flung into the air. Ashley grinned, snapping her 240B's bolt back into place. Good call. Desera didn't stop sniping. We need more good calls unless we want to be overwhelmed. Shade already had another grenade in hand. Inside, the tension was thick. Katrina, Rose, Clora, and Omega stood at the main doors, the last line between the facility and whatever was coming. Katrina's katana was already drawn, the shadows curling around her legs, whispering in anticipation. Rose stood beside her, clad in her fire-kiss armor, the dark plating shimmering with heat. Her bullwhip was coiled at her hip, and her hands flexed, ready to ignite. Clora's eyes were sharp, her body balanced, Omega growling low beside her. The doors shuddered as another explosion hit nearby, then Gunner walked forward. He had seen enough. He turned to Eli. You have the comm. Eli's violet eyes flickered, but she nodded. Without another word, Gunner walked to the doors. Alpha padded beside him, silent but coiled with tension. He stopped at the threshold, rolling his shoulders, loosening his grip. Then he reached for Starbreaker. The massive weapon hummed as he pulled it from his back. Katrina's katana shimmered, the runes along its length glowing faintly as her shadows pooled at her feet. Outside, the enemy was coming. Gunner exhaled, feeling the energy in the air shift. Hold the line. Then the doors swung open. Darren and Caleb had pulled the Wolfmobile back, the minigun dead in the turret, its warning lights blinking like a cruel joke. Darren slammed the brakes, sending the vehicle into a controlled skid behind a half-collapsed barricade. Caleb was already scrambling, wrenching open the weapons maintenance panel. Darren, this thing's jammed up tight. I think a casing got lodged in the feed system. Darren growled, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. No, really? I thought it was taking a break. Caleb shot him a look but didn't stop working. The radio crackled. Elizabeth's voice cut through the static. Bulldog, status? Darren grabbed the handset. Minigun's jammed. We're fixing it. Fix it faster, Elizabeth snapped. We need fire support. Now. Darren gritted his teeth. Yeah, thanks for the motivational speech, Lioness. Ashley's voice came through next, calm but strained over the roar of her 240B. Roofs engaged. Targets closing. Whatever you two are doing, make it quick. Caleb grunted, shoving his arm deeper into the turret's mechanisms. Come on, you stubborn piece of... Clank. Something gave way. Caleb yanked a warped casing from the feed system. Got it. Darren didn't wait. He flipped the safety switch, repriming the weapon. The minigun hummed back to life. The radio lit up again. This time it was Gunner. Bulldog. Darren keyed in immediately. Go for Bulldog. Get back in the fight. We need you at the front. Darren grinned, slamming the Wolfmobile into gear. Copy that. He looked up at Caleb. You ready, kid? Caleb cracked his knuckles. Let's turn him into mist. The Wolfmobile roared forward, back into the fray. The battlefield was chaos. Thralls poured toward the defensive line, their grotesque, snarling forms moving with unnatural speed. Elizabeth moved like liquid fire, her daggers slicing through enemies with lethal precision. Every step, twist, and pivot was an extension of years of muscle memory. Fighting was as natural as breathing. Then, a low, guttural snarl cut through the air. Her cougar spirit animal emerged from the smoke, muscles rippling, eyes locked onto the charging thralls. Then it lunged. A thrall barely had time to react before its throat was torn open, the cougar slamming into another, sending it sprawling. Elizabeth allowed herself a small, sharp grin. Missed you, girl. Olivia wasn't far behind. She moved low and fast, her MP5 barking short, controlled bursts. Each pull of the trigger put another thrall down, but they just kept coming. Michael sat back against a barricade, reloading his M203. You know, I thought I was done with this shit. Alethea flipped a thrall over her shoulder, snapping its arm before jamming her knife into its skull. You say that every time. Another wave of enemies surged forward. Alex sidestepped a lunging thrall, planting a precise shot into its skull before driving her boot into another's chest. The four women moved like a well-oiled machine, back to back, covering each other seamlessly. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like old times. Then the air cracked with a sharp whine. A searing energy bolt cut through the battlefield, punching through a fallen thrall and melting a crater in the dirt. Elizabeth barely had time to react before another blast scorched past her. "Tree line! Take cover!" The Black Dawn troopers had arrived. The thralls were still there, but now they weren't the only problem. Olivia slammed behind a barricade, MP5 still hot. "Oh, this just keeps getting better," Elizabeth growled, her cougar circling, snarling at the new threat. Alethea wiped blood from her face, flipping her blade. "I guess we're doing this the hard way." The Black Dawn opened fire. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting started. The battlefield was a storm of chaos. Elizabeth and her team had been pushed back, caught between the last of the thralls and the Black Dawn firing from the tree line. The Black Dawn troopers were smart, using cover, suppressing fire, forcing the team to stay pinned down. Olivia reloaded her MP5, glancing toward Elizabeth. "We're losing ground fast." Alethea ducked as another energy shot seared over her shoulder, biting into the concrete behind her. "We need a break now." Michael, still hunkered down, loaded another grenade into his M203. "I could use a damn miracle right about now." Then they heard it. The distant howl of an engine. Elizabeth snapped her head up. Through the battlefield's smoke, a familiar set of headlights burned through the haze. Then came the sound, the unmistakable gut-rattling growl of a high-caliber minigun, spooling up. The Wolfmobile had returned. Darren's voice crackled through the radio. "Hold on to your asses." Brrrt! A wave of fire ripped into the tree line. Caleb laughed like a maniac, his hands gripping the minigun's controls as round after enchanted round tore into the Black Dawn troopers' position. The enemy fire stopped instantly. One trooper tried to reposition. His body was torn apart before he could take 2 steps. Another dropped behind cover, only for Darren to swerve the Wolfmobile, shifting the angle, shredding his hiding place. The facility staff didn't waste a second. Elizabeth whistled, "Move!" Olivia, Alethea, Alex, and Michael fanned out, taking up new firing positions. The thralls, disoriented by the shift in firepower, were quickly put down by the regrouped staff. Elizabeth watched the battlefield shift. For the first time since the fight started, they had control again. She keyed her radio, a rare grin on her face. "Nice timing, Bulldog." Darren smirked, swerving the Wolfmobile, kicking up dust. Yeah, you just missed me." Caleb, still on the turret, let out a low whistle. "So, do we just keep mowing them down, or do you need a breather?" Elizabeth flipped a dagger in her grip, eyes locked on the remaining troopers. "Nah, we finished this." Elizabeth had just stepped forward, ready to lead the counterattack, when the air cracked with a shrill whine. A single energy bolt tore across the battlefield. It slammed into her side. She barely had time to react before the force of the shot sent her spinning, her body crumpling to the ground. Her cougar roared. The spirit animal saw the shooter instantly. With a furious snarl, the massive feline launched itself across the field, slamming into the Black Dawn trooper before they could fire again. The trooper screamed, but only for a second. The cougar's claws tore into their throat, silencing them permanently. Darren saw everything. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel, his heartbeat hammered. Then, without thinking, he slammed the radio. "Lioness down! Lioness down!" The radio erupted with overlapping voices. Olivia. "She's hit!" Alethea. "I'm on her!" Gunner's voice cut through the noise, sharp and immediate. "Get her inside now!" Michael was already moving, pushing toward Elizabeth's fallen form. But the battle wasn't over. And now? Now Darren was seeing red. He gritted his teeth, voice low. "Caleb!" Caleb didn't even hesitate. He swung the minigun toward the remaining Black Dawn forces. Darren's voice dropped into something cold. "Burn them down!" The Wolfmobile opened fire. Ashley ejected the last spent belt from the 240B, the heavy machine gun falling silent. She exhaled sharply, rolling her shoulders, feeling the tension in her muscles. Beta stood beside her, tail stiff, ears forward, sensing the fight wasn't over. Ashley grinned, flipping her dagger into a reverse grip. Time to get our hands dirty, girl. Beta let out a low growl, eyes locked on the battlefield below. Desera, still steady behind her scope, continued dropping targets. Crack! Another enemy jerked back, lifeless before hitting the dirt. Then Shade stiffened. He wasn't watching the last of the thralls anymore. His gaze had shifted to the tree line beyond. Ashley saw the way his fingers curled instinctively, the way his posture changed. Something was coming. Desera adjusted her scope, scanning where he was looking. Then she saw them, figures moving through the trees, silent, controlled. Their robes were dark, their hands glowing faintly with conjured energy. Mages. Not many, but enough. Desera cursed under her breath. Black Dawn just upped the ante. Ashley tightened her grip on her dagger. Yeah? Well, so do we. Gunner stood at the front door, Starbreaker in hand, watching the chaos unfold. Beside him, Alpha shifted, muscles coiled, ready to lunge. Clora gripped her staff tightly, Omega at her side, growling low. Katrina's katana was drawn, the shadows around her flickering like living tendrils, waiting for her command. Rose, in her fire-kiss armor, twirled her bullwhip once, flames licking at the air. Then came the flash of light from the tree line. The Black Dawn mages began their assault. A wave of crackling energy surged toward the facility. Move! Gunner barked. The team scattered as the attack slammed into the ground where they had been standing. Rose rolled into position, snapping her whip forward, sending a fiery strike toward the nearest mage. Katrina was already moving, shadows propelling her forward at unnatural speed. Clora dropped low, sweeping her staff outward, a shockwave of energy deflecting an incoming magical blast. Gunner didn't hesitate. He charged forward. The battle had begun. The battlefield was chaos. The mages had barely begun their spell work when the first fell. Crack. A sniper shot from above. Desera's work. One mage dropped lifeless to the dirt, their casting cut short. Another barely had time to turn before Katrina surged forward, shadows wrapping around her form. She moved like a ghost, her katana flashing in a single deadly arc. The second mage stumbled back, blood spraying across the ground before collapsing. Then, shouting from the tree line, 10 Black Dawn troopers emerged, weapons up, firing, but they couldn't hit shit. Their shots went wide, blasting trees, dirt, and anything but their actual targets. Clora and Omega broke right, instantly engaging 2 troopers near the edge of the clearing. Omega lunged, tackling one to the ground, his powerful jaws clamping down on an exposed throat. Clora twirled her staff, deflecting a poorly aimed shot before slamming the weapon into the other trooper's chest. A pulse of energy sent them flying into a tree with a sickening crunch. Meanwhile, Gunner and Alpha tore straight into the heart of the troopers. 4 against 2, not even a fight. Gunner moved like a force of nature, Starbreaker cleaving through the first trooper's armor, sending them sprawling. Alpha flanked left, his powerful bulk knocking another soldier flat before tearing into them. The remaining 2 tried to scramble back, panicked. Gunner never gave them the chance. With a powerful swing, he sent one of them crashing into the dirt, unmoving. Alpha finished the last. At the same time, Rose stood amidst the burning remains of the last thralls, her whip curling around her as she turned. The battlefield was clearing fast, but the fight was far from over. Clora twisted her staff, sending a final pulse of energy through the trooper she had just put down. The battlefield was shifting. The enemy was thinning, but something wasn't right. She scanned the chaos, eyes sharp. Something was missing. She turned toward Gunner, voice cutting through the fight. Has anyone seen Ravina? Silence. That single question froze the team for half a second. Rose's brow furrowed as she turned, fire still smouldering in her armor. No. Katrina's shadows twitched uneasily. She's not here. That was a problem. Gunner's grip on Starbreaker tightened. If Ravina wasn't on the battlefield, then she was playing another game, and he hated unknowns. Then, Darren's voice erupted over the radio. Lioness down! Lioness down! The entire team went still. Jewel, still in the war room, stiffened. She didn't hesitate. She was already moving, shoving past Eli before anyone could stop her. "Jewel, wait!" Eli called, but it was no use. Jewel grabbed a set of medgear, mounted the dirt bike, and peeled out of the compound, heading straight for the facility. Back at the battlefield, Clora's gut twisted. Ravina wasn't here. And now, Elizabeth was down. Something was very, very wrong. Then, the remaining mages made their move. The air crackled. The temperature dropped. A surge of raw, unnatural energy flooded the battlefield. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting worse. Gunner could feel it. The battle wasn't over, not even close. And if Ravina wasn't on the field, that meant she was already inside or looking for a way in. He turned to Rose and Katrina, his voice firm and sharp. "Get inside. Secure the facility." Rose's gaze snapped to his. She knew what that meant. Katrina hesitated. "What about you?" Gunner's expression didn't change. "I'll hold the line." Katrina clenched her jaw, but Rose grabbed her arm. "Move!" They turned and sprinted inside, weapons at the ready. The heavy steel doors slammed shut behind them. Immediately they went straight for the storage area where the Voidstone drug had been kept. Rose checked the locks. Untouched. She exhaled. "It's still here." Katrina wasn't convinced. "Then where the hell is she?" Their next move was clear. They searched the workshop, checking every corner, every shadow, every possible hiding spot. Nothing. And that's when it sank in. Ravina was hunting Argos. Rose and Katrina exchanged a look. Then they moved, heading straight for Argos. The battlefield was shifting. The thralls were dead. The mages were falling one by one. The last Black Dawn troopers were barely holding their ground. Gunner fought like a force of nature. Starbreaker cleaved through an enemy, their body collapsing lifelessly at his feet. A mage raised their hands, gathering energy, but Gunner moved first. His cybernetic arm shot forward, gripping the mage's throat. With a brutal twist, he slammed them into the dirt, snuffing out the spell before it could form. He never saw what was coming next. Clora did. She felt it before she saw it. A presence, a threat. Then, it was there. The Super Trooper stepped out of the shadows, its monstrous form illuminated in the flickering firelight of the battlefield. It was huge, towering, armoured in void-infused plating, veins pulsing with raw, unnatural energy. Its movements were too fast for something its size, and it was coming straight for Gunner. Clora's mouth opened to shout, but it was too late. Boom! The impact shook the earth. The Super Trooper slammed into Gunner like a runaway freight train. His body was lifted off the ground, flung backward with bone-breaking force. He crashed into a pile of wreckage, steel and stone collapsing around him. Alpha howled, surging forward, only to be swatted aside like a rag doll. Clora's breath hitched. This was bad, and this was really bad. She saw Gunner trying to push himself up, dazed from the hit. The Super Trooper wasn't done. It was stalking toward him, slow, deliberate. Clora's heartbeat pounded, but instead of racing, it slowed. Something was happening. She could feel Omega. Not just the way she always had. Something more. Something deeper. She felt her breath sink with his. Felt his instincts flooding her mind. Her vision shifted. The battlefield became sharper, brighter. She could see the way the Super Trooper moved, every shift of its body telegraphed before it even happened. Her muscles tensed, but not from fear. From power. From something ancient, something primal. She wasn't afraid. She was becoming. Her hands curled into fists as Omega let out a deep, echoing snarl. The bond snapped into place, and Clora let it take her. A shockwave of pure energy radiated from her as the merge took hold, her form blurred, shifting, her human instincts mixing with Omega's raw, untamed ferocity. Her vision became sharper. Her body was faster. Her strength doubled. For the first time, she wasn't just connected to Omega, she was Omega. And the Super Trooper? It was hers. Clora launched forward, eyes burning like twin embers in the night. The hunt had begun. Clora felt everything. The battlefield, the wind shifting, the heartbeat of every living thing around her, all of it. She was herself, and she was Omega. Their instincts, their thoughts, their movements, merged, fused, intertwined. They were one mind, one force. But they were still two warriors, two hunters, and their prey was standing right in front of them. The Super Trooper loomed, towering over them, its massive plated fists flexing, its head tilting slightly as if recalibrating its approach. Clora and Omega did not hesitate. They moved together, one fluid, synchronized force of precision and power. The Super Trooper swung first, a brutal earth-shaking blow. Clora sidestepped, but Omega moved at the same time, flanking, circling, calculating. The enemy never saw the second strike coming. Omega's massive form crashed into the trooper's side, teeth finding exposed flesh between the armor plating. Clora was already moving, staff in hand, using the opening to drive it forward. Straight into the enemy's knee joint. Crack! The Super Trooper staggered, its balance momentarily lost. Clora and Omega didn't stop. They attacked like a storm, relentless, tactical, unyielding. Clora twisted, using the momentum of Omega's strike to pivot her staff upward. A precise strike to the throat. The enemy choked, stumbled back. Omega lunged low, his powerful body slamming into its back, forcing it even further off balance. They were hunting, and they were winning. Behind them, Gunner groaned, pushing himself up. He shook his head, his vision refocusing, just in time to see Clora and Omega fighting as one. His chest tightened. He had been the first to merge like this. He had felt the raw power of true unity between man and beast. But this was Clora's first time, and she was perfectly in sync. Gunner didn't move, didn't interfere. He watched. Because this fight belonged to her now. From their vantage point on the roof, Shade and Ashley had a clear view of the battlefield. And what they were witnessing? Neither of them had ever seen anything like it. Ashley had fought beside Gunner and Alpha countless times. She had seen their merge, watched them fight as one, as something more than just man and wolf. But this was Clora and Omega. And for the first time, someone else was stepping into that power. Shade watched, unmoving, calculating. His dark eyes narrowed, tracking every movement. The way Clora and Omega moved together, perfectly synchronized, seamless. They weren't just faster, they weren't just stronger. They were a storm. One hunted from the ground, the other from above. One struck, the other feinted. The Super Trooper was struggling to keep up. And that was terrifying. Ashley let out a low whistle, eyes locked on the fight. Holy shit! Shade said nothing. He had fought alongside Clora for years. He had seen her push herself to the edge over and over. But this was the moment she became something else. A true alpha. Ashley reloaded her pistol but didn't fire. For once, she wasn't looking for an opening. She was just watching, because whatever was happening down there, it was bigger than just this fight. It was a turning point. Then, below them, Gunner shifted. He and Alpha were moving, not to interfere, not to take over, but to position themselves. They were waiting, watching for the perfect moment, the moment Clora would create, because Gunner wasn't going to take this fight from her. But when the time came, he and Alpha would end it.